The wind howled across the frozen parking lot as the door of Iron Pine Grill swung open, letting in a rush of snow and a man no one recognized. He stepped inside quietly, brushing frost from his jacket, his boots leaving a trail of melting water across the wooden floor. To everyone else, he looked like another traveler caught in Montana's sudden winter storm. Nothing unusual. But something about him made Lila Hart look up from behind the counter. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, upright but weary, like someone used to fighting battles no one else could see. Or maybe it was his eyes, calm, alert, as if reading the room in seconds. He took a seat at table 7, the booth under the old elk antlers, and set down a plain Seiko watch beside a wrinkled menu. Lila approached with her practiced smile, the one she used to hide exhaustion from double shifts and the weight of bills she could never outrun. "Cold night," she said softly. "Cold enough to make you rethink your life choices." He chuckled, voice deep but gentle. "Ribeye, medium rare, and a coffee if it's not too much trouble." Lila nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. Not from him, never from him, but from Brock Hensley's eyes burning into her from across the bar. The owner had been in a foul mood all week, angrier than usual, pacing the floor like a guard dog, waiting to snap. And tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, the danger around him felt heavier, more real. She brought the man his coffee. He thanked her with a kind smile, one that softened her defenses for a moment she wished she could afford. But when she leaned forward to place the mug, she slipped something into his hand, a folded scrap of order paper. He froze. Their eyes met. "Don't react," she whispered. He lowered his gaze as if checking the coffee. With 2 fingers, he opened the note beneath the rim of the cup. "Do not react. They're watching you. Leave after 10 minutes. A pulse flickered at his jaw. Fear, anger, but his expression remained perfectly calm. He lifted the coffee and took a slow sip like nothing unusual had happened. But she saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way his fingers tightened around the mug. She turned away quickly, heart hammering, praying he understood she wasn't crazy. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't wrong. Because Brock had plans tonight. Plans she had overheard. Plans dangerous enough that even a stranger was safer warned than left blind. And Lila knew, from the cold gleam in Brock's eyes, that the man at table 7 had walked straight into something he never saw coming. And in the next 60 seconds, everything in that quiet little steakhouse was about to explode. Mason didn't look up right away. Years of navigating boardrooms full of sharks had taught him how to stay perfectly still, even when adrenaline roared through his veins. He folded the note beneath his palm, pretending to study the steak menu like any ordinary traveler trying to decide between ribeye and sirloin. But Lila saw it. The shift. A tiny flicker in his expression, so small most customers would have missed it. But she didn't. She watched people for a living, watched their moods, their tempers, their tells. This man had just gone from relaxed to calculating in a heartbeat. Across the room, Brock Hensley wiped down a spotless counter for the 3rd time, eyes locked on table 7 like a hawk circling prey. His jaw twitched every time Mason moved. Lila didn't know who the stranger really was. But she knew Brock. And Brock never stared at someone that long unless he saw opportunity or threat. Mason finally lifted his head, casual as a man considering dessert. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly when Lila approached again. She forced a smile. "Just another night." But he noticed the bruise near her wrist, the way she kept her arms close, protective, the way she glanced over her shoulder before speaking. Something was deeply wrong here. "Who's watching me?" he murmured. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Please, before he does something." Before she could walk away, Brock barked, "Lila, table 12 needs refills, now." She flinched, not visibly, but enough for Mason to see the fear ripple through her. He watched her hurry off, gripping the coffee pot like it weighed 50 pounds. Something in his chest tightened. He'd come to Montana undercover to investigate labor exploitation, not to get involved in strangers' battles. But the look in Lila's eyes made walking away impossible. Mason unfolded the note under the table, reading it again, slower this time. "They're watching you. Leave after 10 minutes. He scanned the room. A man at the corner booth was pretending to read a newspaper, but the angle of the pages was wrong, too stiff. Another lingered near the bathrooms, glancing over every few seconds. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. And then Mason noticed something he hadn't seen before. The back door quietly unlocking, as if someone was preparing for him to run. And that's when Mason realized they weren't watching him to see if he stayed. They were waiting to see where he'd try to escape. Lila Hart moved through the dining room with the rhythm of someone who'd learned to survive by blending into the background. To customers, she was the friendly waitress with the tired smile and steady hands. But inside, she was unraveling thread by thread. Every evening at Iron Pine Grill demanded more strength than she had left. Her shift had started with a call from the hospital. "Your brother's insurance doesn't cover the next round of therapy," the woman on the phone said, voice polite but empty. Lila had swallowed hard, thanked her, and walked into work pretending her world hadn't tilted again. Then Brock Hensley cornered her in the storage room. "You're late." "It was 5 minutes," she whispered. 5 minutes is $5 off your paycheck, maybe more. Depends how cooperative you are tonight." His breath smelled like whiskey. His hand brushed her arm, too familiar, too threatening. She jerked away, and his expression sharpened like a blade. "Careful," he warned. "I don't tolerate attitude." Lila left the room shaking, slipping her phone into her apron. The cracked iPhone screen reflected her face, pale, exhausted, trapped. She had no family here except Noah, no safety net, no time to fall apart. She wanted to scream, to run, to breathe without fear. But quitting wasn't an option. Brock knew that. He fed off it. Harper Lane, the only person Lila trusted, caught her at the drink station. "You okay?" Harper whispered, glancing toward Brock. "Yeah," Lila lied. "Just tired." "Lila, he's getting worse." "I know." Harper lowered her voice. "Then why stay?" Lila stared at the floor, because her brother needed treatment, because rent was due, because Brock had hinted he'd make things difficult if she tried leaving, because she didn't have choices, just consequences. She forced another smile and grabbed the tray for table 12, but her eyes drifted back to table 7, to the stranger who wasn't really a stranger anymore, the man she'd warned, the man who looked at her like he could see straight through the mask she wore. Mason watched her too, quietly, studying the way she winced each time she passed Brock. And that worried her. Kindness was dangerous here. Attention was dangerous. But something about him felt safe. Safe enough that she'd risked everything to slip him that note. She hoped she hadn't made a mistake. Then Brock suddenly called out from the bar, voice sharp, "Lila, office, now." And the look in his eyes told her this time. He wasn't planning to let her walk out the same. Mason watched Lila disappear behind the office door, Brock closing it with a slow, deliberate push that made every instinct in him sharpen. He didn't know what Brock wanted with her, but he knew the look of a man who enjoyed having power over someone weaker. He had seen it before, years ago, when he worked under a ruthless CEO who treated struggling employees like stepping stones. That memory alone was enough to crack the calm expression on his face. He reached for his fork, pretending to cut into the ribeye he had no intention of eating. Instead, he glanced around the room again. The man with the newspaper was still in the corner booth, but now the pages had lowered a few inches. Too interested. Too alert. The guy by the bathrooms pretended to scroll through his phone, but Mason recognized the stance, feet shoulder-width apart, ready to move. This wasn't just surveillance. This was preparation. Mason slid his hand into his jacket, touching the inside pocket where his small notebook sat. Not the polished kind he used in boardrooms. This one was cheap, plain, purchased at a gas station so he wouldn't draw attention. Inside were observations from the last 3 weeks undercover. Patterns of underpayment, staff injuries, suspicious supply orders. He had seen workplaces like this, but never one that felt this volatile. Brock emerged from the office first, wiping his hands on a towel, eyes cold. Lila followed a moment later, face pale, her breaths tight and shallow. She didn't look at Mason this time. She walked past him fast, heading straight for the kitchen, as if distance might keep her safe. She didn't look safe. Mason leaned back, pretending to stretch. "Rough night?" he asked when she passed. She barely paused. "Please, don't talk to me right now." He heard the tremble in her voice. Something had happened behind that door, something she didn't want witnessed. Mason's jaw tightened. He couldn't intervene yet, not without blowing his cover or putting her in more danger, but he needed more information. So he stood up, walked toward the hallway near the restrooms, and pretended to wash his hands. From there, he could see Brock slip a manila envelope to the guy with the newspaper. The man nodded once, tapping the edge of the paper like it contained instructions. And then Mason saw it. Written on the corner of the envelope in black marker, Table 7. That was the moment Mason realized the trap wasn't forming around Lila. It was closing around him. The dinner rush hit like a storm. Orders piling, waitstaff weaving between tables, the kitchen sizzling in chaos. Lila tried to lose herself in the noise, hoping movement would quiet the fear Brock had planted minutes earlier. Her mind raced, chest tight, but she kept going because that was all she knew. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep working. Harper shot her a worried glance from the grill. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing important," Lila lied, grabbing plates with trembling fingers. Harper didn't buy it, but before she could push further, the swinging kitchen door slammed open. Brock stepped inside, expression sharp. "Everyone pick it up. We're behind." His voice alone made the room shrink. Lila turned toward the prep counter when suddenly, a deafening crash. A metal rack overloaded with pans lurched sideways, tipping straight toward her head. She didn't even have time to scream, but someone else moved. Mason burst through the kitchen door with a speed that didn't match his laid-back traveler act. He grabbed Lila by the arm and yanked her out of the way just as the pans slammed into the floor where she'd been standing. Clattering metal echoed through the kitchen. For one breath, no one spoke. Lila stared at the wreckage, heart pounding. Those pans were heavy, too heavy to fall by accident. Harper swore under her breath. That rack was secured this morning. Someone pulled the lock. Brock stepped forward immediately, too quickly, hands raised in fake shock. "What the hell happened in here?" His tone was all performance. Lila felt her stomach twist. Mason glanced at the fallen rack, then at Brock, then at the two men near the walk-in freezer who were suddenly looking anywhere but the scene. He wasn't stupid. Someone had staged this. And he had a sickening suspicion who gave the order. "You okay?" Mason asked Lila quietly. She nodded, but her eyes burned, not just from shock, from humiliation, from knowing she was becoming a liability to a man who didn't even know her name yesterday. Before anyone could catch their breath, Brock barked, "Everyone back to work! Accidents happen! Clean this mess up!" But Mason didn't move. He held Brock's stare just a second longer than was safe. Brock noticed and smiled, a slow, curling smile that told Mason this wasn't over, because accidents didn't happen twice unless someone wanted them to. The kitchen slowly returned to motion, but the mood had shifted. Every worker moved a little faster, a little quieter, stealing glances at Brock as he circled the room like a predator, unhappy with his hunt. Lila kept her head down, rinsing plates, pretending her hands didn't shake every time she heard his boots scrape across the tile. Mason stayed near the prep counter, observing without drawing attention. He wasn't supposed to interfere again, he knew that. Undercover work required distance, patience. But seeing Lila almost crushed had scraped old wounds open, memories of coworkers he couldn't save years ago when he was just another broke kid with no power. He wasn't powerless now, but he couldn't reveal that. Not yet. Brock's shadow fell over him. "You new in town?" Brock asked, voice casual in the way a loaded gun looked decorative. "Passing through," Mason replied, keeping his tone friendly, neutral. "Long drive." Brock's eyes flicked to Mason's jacket pocket, the outline of the cheap notebook visible beneath the fabric. "You a writer or something?" "Just a guy with a notebook," Mason said lightly, but Brock didn't look convinced. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Funny thing about travelers, some are what they say they are, some aren't." Mason met his gaze evenly. "You accusing me of something?" A thin smile split Brock's face. "Not yet." Before Mason could respond, Harper stomped over, sliding a tray of prepped plates between them. "If you two are done comparing testosterone levels, Table 9 needs their order." Brock's glare snapped to her. "Watch your mouth." "Oh, I do," Harper shot back. "All the time." She shoved the tray toward Mason. "Here, make yourself useful." It was the perfect excuse to break away. Mason took it, but Brock wasn't finished. As Mason walked off, Brock leaned close to Lila at the sink, voice low and venomous. "Your little friend is curious. I don't like curious." Lila froze. Brock's hand brushed the counter beside her hip, not touching her, just close enough to remind her he could. "Tell him to keep his eyes down," he murmured, "or next time I won't miss." She swallowed hard. "He's just a customer." "For your sake," Brock said softly, "he'd better stay that way." Mason returned just in time to see the color drain from Lila's face, and that was when he knew. This wasn't simply a dangerous workplace. This was a powder keg, and Brock was already striking the match. The moment Lila stepped outside into the freezing night air, she felt her lungs open for the first time in hours. The wind bit at her cheeks, sharp and cold, but at least it wasn't Brock. At least she could breathe. She wrapped her arms around herself and walked toward the back lot, where employees kept their beat-up cars under dim yellow lights. She needed a minute. Just 1 minute. She didn't hear the footsteps until Mason's voice cut through the silence. "Lila?" She stopped, spine tightening. "You shouldn't be out here." He approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. Snow clung to his shoulders, his breath fogged in the air. "I just wanted to check you're okay." "I'm fine," she said quickly. It was a lie so thin it snapped between them. Mason studied her quietly. He wasn't staring the way Brock did. He wasn't analyzing her the way the watchers in the diner had. His gaze was something else, concern mixed with frustration, like he hated that he couldn't fix what he didn't understand. "You warned me for a reason," he said. "Just tell me what's going on." She shook her head, eyes burning. "If I talk, he'll punish me, and you." "He already tried to punish you," Mason replied, jaw tight. "That rack didn't fall on accident." Her breath hitched, but she didn't deny it. Mason stepped closer, not enough to corner her, just enough that she felt a flicker of warmth. "Lila, I can help." "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "You can't." "No one can. That man owns this town. He owns people's homes, their paychecks, their silence." Her knees buckled slightly and she leaned against the cold metal of her old Toyota. Mason instinctively reached out, but she held up a trembling hand. "Please don't be kind to me," she said. "Kindness gets people hurt in that place." He exhaled, long and slow. "Then tell me what he said to you, in the office." Lila stared at the snow-covered ground. "He told me accidents happen more often when I forget my place." Mason felt something in his chest twist. Hard. A gust of wind swept through the lot, rattling the loose fence. Lila shivered and looked toward the back door, fear flashing in her eyes. "You should go," she whispered. "If Brock sees us out here together—" But she didn't finish, because the back door creaked open, and Brock's silhouette filled the doorway, watching them, unmoving, listening. Brock didn't say a word at first. He just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, frame blocking the warm light behind him. Snowflakes drifted between them like tiny sparks of danger. Lila stiffened instantly, shoulders tightening as if bracing for impact. Mason saw it, saw the instinctive fear ripple through her body, and something hot and furious ignited in his chest. "Well," Brock drawled finally, "isn't this cozy?" Lila stepped away from Mason so quickly she nearly slipped on the ice. I was just taking out trash," she stammered. "There's no trash in your hands," Brock said, tilting his head. Lila froze. Mason stepped in before she could crumble. "I stopped her to ask for directions," he said calmly. "Roads are a mess tonight." Brock's eyes slid to him, sharp, probing, a predator sizing up unfamiliar prey. "Funny," Brock said. "I didn't think tourists linger behind my building." Mason shrugged lightly. "Storm caught me. Thought the back might be less icy." Brock let out a humorless laugh. "Storm's catching a lot of folks off guard tonight." For a long second, none of them moved. Lila's breath hitched, barely audible in the wind. Mason understood then. She wasn't just scared of losing her job. She was scared of being hurt. And Brock understood he'd seen that. "Lila," Brock said, tone cold enough to frost glass, "I need you inside. Now." Her eyes flicked to Mason, an apology, a plea, a warning all at once, before she hurried past Brock with her head down. Brock didn't follow her. Instead, he stepped closer to Mason, boots crunching on ice. "You enjoy getting involved in things that aren't your business?" he asked quietly. Mason met his gaze without flinching. "Just being polite." "Polite can get you hurt around here," Brock murmured. "People misunderstand intentions." "I don't think I'm the one misunderstanding," Mason replied. A slow grin curled across Brock's face, one that didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's the problem. You think?" There was a pause, the kind that carries threat, not silence. Then Brock leaned in slightly. "If I were you, I'd finish your meal, pay your bill, and get the hell out of Montana before sunrise." He turned and walked back inside, letting the metal door slam hard behind him. Mason remained where he stood, snow gathering on his jacket, breathing steady. He now knew two things with absolute certainty. Brock was hiding something far bigger than a hostile workplace, and Mason Wild had just become a problem Brock intended to solve. Snow hammered the roof of Iron Pine Grill as Mason stepped back inside. The warmth hit him like a wall, but it didn't calm him. It only sharpened the sense that every eye in the room was tracking him. He returned to table 7, pretending to finish his meal, but his instinct screamed, Brock wasn't letting this go. Not tonight. He slipped a few bills under the plate, more than enough to avoid conversation, and headed toward the exit. From the corner of his eye, he saw the newspaper man stand up. The guy by the bathroom straightened. Brock watched him with a thin-lipped smile that said, "Run, I dare you." Outside, the storm had grown brutal. Wind ripped across the parking lot, snow swirling in thick bands that obscured the road. Mason pulled up his collar and headed toward his rental Corolla. The moment he clicked the unlocked button, headlights flared to life at the edge of the lot, a dark SUV, engine running, facing him. Mason didn't break stride, but his pulse spiked. He climbed in his car, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. For 2 seconds, there was nothing behind him but snow. Then the SUV rolled out of the lot, following. He tested it by taking a turn off the main street. The SUV turned too. His jaw tightened. He'd been followed before, by competitors, reporters, investors with too much time. But this felt different. This felt personal, violent. The wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear as he navigated the winding back road leading away from town. Branches bent under the weight of fresh snow. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The SUV closed the distance, headlights glowing like twin threats in his mirror. He pressed the accelerator. The Corolla fishtailed but caught traction. The SUV stayed glued behind him. A sudden flash of light ahead made him curse. A fallen tree blocked the road. Mason gripped the wheel and swerved sideways, plowing into a snowbank. The SUV screeched to a stop 40 yards behind him. He stumbled out of the car, breath coming hard in the icy air. The SUV door opened. A man stepped out. Not Brock, someone bigger, broader, someone sent to handle things quietly. Mason backed away, boots sinking in the snow. The man reached into his coat. A weapon! Before Mason could react, a voice shouted from the trees, frantic, sharp, terrified, "Mason, this way!" Lila. And when he turned toward her voice, he realized she had just risked everything to save him. Again. Mason didn't think. He ran toward Lila's voice, snow spraying beneath his boots as the storm swallowed everything behind him. Branches clawed at his jacket, wind howled through the trees, and each breath felt like inhaling shards of ice. He followed the outline of her figure, small, shaking, frantic, as she waved him deeper into the woods. "Hurry," she whispered. "They won't follow far into the forest. Visibility's too bad." But Mason knew men like the one behind them, men hired to do someone else's dirty work, didn't care about visibility. They cared about the paycheck waiting when the job was finished. "What were you thinking coming out here?" he hissed, catching up to her. "What was I thinking?" Lila shot back, voice breaking. "I saw that SUV pull out. Brock doesn't send people to follow customers unless... Her breath caught, and she didn't finish. Mason slowed, placing a steadying hand on her arm. It wasn't the time for fear, but it radiated off her like heat. "You shouldn't be involved in this," Mason said. She jerked her arm from his grasp. "You think I meant to be. You think I wanted any of this. You're the one who came into that diner and acted like what?" he demanded. "Like someone who wasn't afraid." Mason's jaw clenched. Snow whipped around them, masking shapes and sounds. They pressed deeper into the woods until the headlights from the road disappeared completely. "Lila," he said quietly, "you need to know something about me." She looked at him, eyes wide, terrified, waiting. "I'm not who you think I am." A sound cracked through the forest, like a boot crunching ice. They froze. Mason stepped in front of her instinctively. "I didn't come to Montana by accident," he whispered. "I came looking for places like Brock's, places hurting people like you." Lila blinked, confused. "Why would you—" Before he could answer, another crack echoed. Closer. He grabbed her hand. "Move, now." They ran again, weaving between trees until they reached an old maintenance shed half buried in snow. Mason pulled her inside and shut the door quietly. Lila stood trembling, tears streaking her frozen cheeks. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "Who are you?" Mason inhaled, knowing this was the moment everything would turn. "My real name is Mason Ward," he said, "and I'm—" A fist slammed into the shed door so hard the walls shook. "Come out," a voice growled, "and maybe I won't break anything important." The pounding on the shed door grew louder, each strike sending a tremor through the thin wooden walls. Lila pressed both hands over her mouth to keep from crying out. Mason stood between her and the door, shoulders squared, breath steady despite the danger closing in around them. "I don't understand," Lila whispered. "Why would Brock send someone after you?" "Because he thinks I know more than I do," Mason replied quietly. And now he's right. The man outside kicked the door again. Snow fell from the rafters, dusting Mason's hair. Lila grabbed his arm, voice trembling. "Mason, please, my brother needs me. I can't disappear. I can't—" He turned to her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. Something cracked in her chest at the softness of his voice. No one had said that to her in years, not since before Noah's accident, before her father's descent into disability, before Brock had twisted her life into a cage with no exit. The door hinge groaned. The intruder was prying it loose. "We need a way out," Mason murmured, scanning the shed. His gaze landed on a narrow heating panel near the floor. He crouched, ripping it open to reveal a crawl space leading beneath the maintenance building. "Ladies first," he whispered. "I can't fit." "You can. Lila, you have to try." Her pulse hammered. She dropped to her knees, squeezing into the tight space as cold air rushed over her arms. Snow and dirt pressed against her clothes. Mason followed, pulling the grate back just enough to hide the opening. The shed door finally gave way behind them. Boots stomped inside. Lila held her breath, her cheek pressed against the frozen ground. Mason lay close behind her, one hand gently over her shoulder, steadying her panic. The man's footsteps moved around the shed, slow, deliberate. Something scraped across the floor, wood dragging, metal shifting, searching. Then he spoke. "I know you're close," the man growled, "and the boss wants you alive." Lila's heart stopped. Alive? For what? The footsteps moved closer to their hiding place. Mason tightened his grip on her shoulder, breath whispering near her ear. "When I say run," he murmured, "you run as fast as you can." "But where?" The footsteps stopped directly above them, and then a knife blade punched straight through the floorboards. The knife tore through the floorboards again, splintering the wood inches from Lila's face. She bit down on a scream. Mason wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her back just enough to avoid the next strike. Snow and dust swirled around them each time the blade pierced downward. "He's trying to flush us out," Mason whispered, voice low and steady despite the chaos. Lila's pulse thundered in her ears. "He knows we're under here." "He knows," Mason said, "but he doesn't know which direction we'll run." Above them, the intruder muttered curses as he stabbed another hole in the floor. The shed creaked with every blow. This wasn't just intimidation, this was desperation. Whoever he was, he needed Mason alive, and he didn't care what damage he caused getting him there. Mason scanned the narrow crawl space, eyes adjusting to the dim light. 10 feet ahead, he spotted a thin strip of daylight bleeding in from the collapsed exterior wall. "That's our exit," he breathed. Lila nodded, but her limbs felt frozen. Then, a vibration buzzed in her apron pocket, her phone. The cracked iPhone screen lit up faintly with a name that made her chest tighten. Noah. Urgent, her brother. Her brother never used urgent, unless... She fumbled for the phone, shielding the light from the intruder above. A text popped up. "Insurance denied the therapy again. They said someone called on your behalf to cancel the authorization. Did you do that? Please tell me this is a mistake." Lila's stomach dropped. Brock. He had done it. He had sabotaged her brother's treatment, just to keep control of her. Her vision blurred with shock and fury. "Mason, he's hurting people outside the restaurant too." Mason's eyes hardened. "What do you mean?" "He called my brother's insurance. He had my shifts changed. He threatened..." Her voice cracked. "I thought I could survive it if I kept my head down. But this is different." A final violent stab of the knife cracked through the floor above, showering them with splinters. Mason gripped her arm. "We crawl to that opening. When we hit the outside, we run. Don't look back." Lila wiped her eyes, nodding. The footsteps paused. Silence. Then the intruder's voice rumbled through the broken floorboards. "I know what she did," he growled, "and Brock wants her delivered first." Lila froze, because for the first time, the danger wasn't just about Mason, it was coming for her. They crawled through the narrow passage, elbows scraping the frozen ground, breath fogging the cramped air. Lila pushed ahead toward the thin line of daylight, leaking through the broken foundation. Every inch forward felt like moving through concrete, but she refused to stop. Her brother needed her. She needed to survive. Behind them, the intruder's boots thudded across the shed floor. Mason glanced back once and saw the man crouching, examining the holes he had carved. The next move would be brutal. "Keep going," Mason whispered urgently. "We're close." Lila pressed forward until her fingers touched cold air. She pushed Snow aside and squeezed herself through the gap. When she emerged outside, the blizzard swallowed her whole. Wind roaring, snow slicing through the night, trees bending under the weight of ice. Mason emerged seconds later, pulling the grate behind him. "We head toward the ravine," he said. "If we stay low, they'll lose sight." But Lila wasn't listening. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Noah. "Lila, please answer. They said you canceled the payment plan. They're threatening to stop treatment tonight." Her stomach twisted painfully. Brock wasn't just punishing her, he was dismantling her entire life piece by piece. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lila, look at me." Her eyes met his, wide with fear and desperation. "You didn't cause this," Mason said firmly. "He did, and he's going to answer for it." Before she could respond, a crack echoed through the woods. A gunshot. Snow burst from a tree trunk inches to Mason's right. "Run!" he shouted. They bolted into the blizzard, branches whipping their faces, feet slipping on ice. The forest blurred around them as adrenaline surged. Behind them, heavy footsteps pounded, closing the distance. Lila gasped for air, her lungs burning. "We can't outrun him." "Yes, we can," Mason insisted. "Just keep—" He suddenly stopped. Lila nearly crashed into him. Ahead, through the wall of snow, faint lights glowed. Not headlights. Flashlights. Multiple. Mason's heart dropped. Someone else was waiting. More figures emerged between the pines. Men in heavy coats, radios clipped to their shoulders. Brock's people. They'd anticipated the escape route. They'd planned for it. They were surrounded. Mason stepped in front of Lila instinctively. "Stay behind me," he said. The men closed in. One lifted his radio and spoke. "Target located," both of them. Lila felt the world tilt, because the way he said it made one thing terrifyingly clear. Brock hadn't just set a trap for Mason, he'd set one for her. The men circled them, boots crunching in the snow, breaths fogging in the freezing night as Lila and Mason backed toward a fallen tree. The forest, once a shield, now felt like a cage tightening around them. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She reached instinctively for Mason's sleeve, needing something solid, something that didn't shift beneath her feet. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, face hidden beneath a fur-lined hood. "Orders are to bring you in alive," he told Mason, then turned to Lila with a chilling smirk. "Her too, the boss has questions." Lila's stomach twisted. Questions. The word tasted wrong, dangerous. Mason moved subtly, positioning himself so she was behind him. "You don't want to do this," he warned. "Walk away now, and I won't involve anyone above me." "That's the thing," the man said. "We already know who's above you." Another man raised something to his ear. A radio. "Tell Brock we have the founder." Lila froze. Founder. Mason tensed, jaw clenching. And in that moment, she understood. Mason Ward wasn't just undercover. He wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful, far more than he'd let on. A light snapped on in the distance, then another. Headlights cut through the trees. Not from Brock's men. These were sleeker, cleaner, moving with precision. An SUV slid to a stop and a tall figure stepped out wearing a black wool coat dusted with snow. His voice rang through the forest, deep and controlled. "That's enough." Mason exhaled once. Sharp recognition. "Colin?" Lila blinked. Colin Ward. Mason's older brother, CEO, a name even she'd heard on television screens in waiting rooms and hospital corridors, and now he stood in the Montana woods like he'd stepped out of a Manhattan boardroom by mistake. Colin's gaze swept over Brock's men. "You're interfering with a federal labor investigation," he said coolly, "and assaulting my brother. Smart choice." The men faltered, radios buzzed, uncertainty rippled through their formation. Then Colin stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You have exactly 5 seconds to get out of these woods." Snow gusted around them, the storm howling like a warning. No one moved. Colin reached into his coat and pulled out a badge. "Federal authorization," he said. "Move." Panic flashed across the men's faces, but the largest one didn't back down. Instead, he hissed into his radio, "Tell Brock Plan B is a go." And that was the moment Lila realized. Brock didn't need to capture them tonight. He had already set something in motion elsewhere. Brock's men scattered into the storm the moment Colin flashed that badge, disappearing between the trees like shadows dissolving into white. But Mason didn't relax. If anything, he looked more tense than before. "Plan B," he muttered. He wasn't bluffing. Lila hugged her arms around herself. What does that mean? What did he do? Colin stepped between them, his coat whipping in the wind. "We need to get you two out of here now. Brock's smarter than we thought. If he couldn't silence you directly, he'll take another route." Mason's phone buzzed. One look at the screen made his expression harden. "It's starting," he said tightly. "I'm trending." Lila blinked. "Trending?" Mason handed her the phone. There it was, a grainy video taken from the diner window earlier that night. A clip of Mason pulling her out of the way as the kitchen rack collapsed. But the caption twisted everything. "Tech millionaire caught manhandling waitress in Montana. Intent unknown." Comments poured in, fast and cruel, speculating, accusing, twisting the truth into something ugly. Lila felt sick. This is all fake. Anyone can see. "No," Mason said quietly. "People see what they want to see." Another notification, a second post, this one worse. A blurry photo of Mason sitting with Lila in the parking lot, taken from an angle meant to look intimate. The caption, "Married founder spotted with mystery woman during secret trip." Lila's jaw dropped. "Married? I'm not," Mason said immediately. "But Brock knows the fastest way to ruin a reputation is scandal." Colin swore under his breath. "He's hitting you with ethics violations, assault implications, investor panic. He's trying to collapse your company overnight." Lila stared between them, panic rising. "This is because I warned you? Because I talked to you?" "No," Mason said, stepping closer. "This is because Brock has been exploiting people for years, and he finally met someone who can expose him." "But my brother," Lila choked out. "His treatment. What if Brock escalates? What if Noah—" "We won't let that happen," Mason said. His voice softened. "I promise." Colin opened the SUV door. "Both of you. Now. We're taking this to Manhattan. Damage control first, justice second." As Lila climbed in, shaking, she felt the weight of a new reality settling onto her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for her job or her safety anymore. She was fighting a war she never asked to enter. Colin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then froze. "Mason," he said, "turn on the news." Because the headline now read, "Breaking warrant issued for Mason Ward, connection to illegal operation." The SUV cut through the Montana storm, windshield wipers fighting to keep the road visible. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Fear, disbelief, and urgency tangled together like a tightening rope. Lila sat pressed against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she replayed the headline over and over. A warrant. For Mason. But he hadn't done anything wrong, not even close. Across from her, Mason leaned forward with his hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't shaking. That almost scared Lila more. "Mason," she whispered, "they're accusing you of running an illegal operation." "I know," he said quietly, "but it's not true." He finally looked up, meeting her gaze. "It doesn't need to be true. It just needs to sound true." Colin drove with tight knuckles. "They won't arrest you. Not once we get to Manhattan. We'll control the narrative. But Brock got ahead of us. Someone fed law enforcement falsified documents." "Documents?" Lila echoed. Colin nodded. Shell companies, transfers, fake signatures, all pointing to Mason funneling money through restaurants like Brock's. Lila felt her stomach drop. "But why tie you to Brock's operation?" "Because I've spent the last year funding investigations into labor fraud," Mason said, "and Brock used that information to frame me for the very crimes I'm trying to expose." The injustice of it cut her deep. So the man destroying lives is now painting you as the villain. Mason exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. In the court of public opinion? Yes. And investors will panic. Boards panic. Entire companies collapse over headlines like this. Lila swallowed hard, and my warning you made it worse. No. Mason shook his head firmly. You didn't cause this. You revealed it. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the snow-thick road. Colin cursed under his breath and switched to a side route. "We can't go to the airport," he said. "Brock's people could have tipped off security. The warrant gives them an excuse to detain Mason on sight." Lila's pulse raced. "So where do we go?" Colin's phone rang, an encrypted line. He answered, listened, then his expression darkened. "That was Evelyn Rhodes," Colin said. "Your attorney friend?" Mason asked. "Our crisis attorney," Colin corrected. "She said someone leaked your undercover identity to the media. Full details. Everything." Lila felt the air leave her lungs. Everything. Even... "Yes," Colin said, "including your connection to Lila." The SUV slowed as headlights appeared behind them. Too close. Too familiar. Mason turned, eyes narrowing. "That's Brock's truck," he whispered, and then the truck accelerated, aiming straight for them. Colin jerked the steering wheel hard, swerving the SUV just as Brock's truck barreled forward. Snow exploded around them in a blinding spray. Lila grabbed the seat in front of her, heart slamming against her ribs as metal scraped metal. The impact wasn't direct, thank God, but close enough that the SUV fishtailed wildly. "Hold on!" Colin barked. The world tilted sideways for a breathless second before the tires gripped the icy road again. Behind them, Brock's truck revved louder. He wasn't trying to scare them. He was trying to stop them. Mason twisted around in his seat. "He's coming again, faster!" "No, he won't catch us," Colin muttered, accelerating. "This road connects to the state highway. Once we hit that, we're gone." But Lila wasn't listening. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A message from an unknown number. She opened it with trembling hands. A video from the diner's security feed. Her breath caught painfully. It showed her in Brock's office earlier that night, looking shaken, cornered, as Brock loomed over her. But the video had been edited. In the doctored clip, it looked like Lila was threatening him. Her voice had been cut, replaced, her body language spliced out of context, the angle manipulated to hide Brock's aggression. The caption, "Waitress seen extorting restaurant owner, part of larger fraud scheme." Lila felt the world collapse beneath her. "Mason," she whispered, voice breaking. "He framed you and me. Together." Mason took her phone, jaw locking as he watched the clip. "He's building a story, one where we're the criminals." Colin slammed a hand on the wheel. "He's trying to erase his entire operation by pinning it on you two. If this spreads before we reach Manhattan..." "It already has," Lila choked out. "Look at the view count." Within minutes, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in. "Typical gold-digging waitress. Millionaire caught with scam artist. Arrest them both." Lila covered her face with shaking hands. No, this can't be happening. My brother, my job, I'll lose everything." Mason grabbed her wrist gently, pulling her hands down so she would look at him. "Lila, listen to me. This isn't the end. This is the turning point, I swear to you. We will fix this." Before she could respond, Colin cursed violently. "Damn it, he's beside us." Brock's truck surged forward, drawing parallel to the SUV. Lila looked out the window, straight into Brock's twisted smile. He mouthed two chilling words. "You lose." Then Brock swerved, hard. and the SUV spun violently toward the edge of the ravine. The SUV spun, tires skidding across the icy road as gravity tilted violently to one side. Lila screamed as the world outside became a blur of white and darkness. Colin fought the wheel with both hands, muscles straining, trying to keep them from sliding off the ravine's edge. "Brace yourselves," he shouted. A bone-jarring slam shook the vehicle as it crashed sideways into a snowbank. The impact stopped the spin, but not the danger. The SUV teetered, half its weight hanging over the drop. Mason grabbed Lila, pulling her against him as the vehicle creaked ominously. "Don't move," he whispered. Brock's truck screeched to a stop behind them. He climbed out slowly like a man enjoying a show he'd orchestrated. Snow whipped around him, but he looked unfazed. Calm, even satisfied. Colin shoved his door open and stumbled onto solid ground. "Get out!" he yelled. Mason reached for Lila's seatbelt. It jammed. He yanked harder. "Come on, don't do this." The latch clicked free. He lifted her out just as the SUV groaned and dropped another inch toward the ravine. Lila fell into the snow, gasping, Mason right behind her. Together they scrambled away from the tipping vehicle. Brock laughed, slow and cruel. "You two really know how to make my job easier." "Your job?" Mason snapped, stepping in front of Lila. "What is this, Brock? Extortion, fraud, attempted murder?" "You think too small," Brock said, wiping snow from his jacket. "I run the people who run the people, and you're just a loose thread someone asked me to cut." Wind roared through the trees. Headlights appeared suddenly. Colin's backup SUV barreling around the bend. Brock's expression shifted, but he didn't retreat. He pulled out his phone. One touch, one call, and everything could collapse again. Lila stood, shaking but resolute. "Stop. This doesn't end the way you think." He smirked. "Sweetheart, you don't know how this world works." She stepped closer. "No, you don't know who you're dealing with." Before Brock could respond, another vehicle slid to a halt. Sleek black Manhattan plates. Evelyn Rhodes stepped out, hair whipping in the wind, holding a stack of documents sealed in plastic. "Brock Hensley," she announced, voice carrying over the storm, "you are officially under federal investigation." Brock's smirk vanished. Evelyn continued, "And by the time we're done, the only job you'll have left is explaining your crimes to a jury." The snow fell silent. Then Brock ran, straight into the trees, and straight toward whatever backup plan he'd been preparing all along. Brock crashed through the trees, branches slashing his face as he sprinted into the storm. He wasn't running blindly. He moved with purpose, heading toward the maintenance road that wound behind the ridge. Lila, Mason, Colin, and Evelyn followed as fast as the snow allowed, their breaths sharp in the frozen air. "He's going for his truck!" Colin shouted. "No!" Mason said. "He's going for whatever he thinks will save him." Evelyn clutched the evidence packet to her chest. "We can't let him destroy anything. That documentation ties him to labor fraud, tax evasion, and trafficking of undocumented workers. If he reaches that safe house, he'll burn it all," Mason finished. Lila pushed harder, her legs trembling, lungs burning. She wasn't strong like Mason or fearless like Harper, but she had something they didn't. She knew Brock's patterns, the places he hid, the shortcuts only employees noticed. "There's a split ahead," she gasped. "He'll take the right path. It leads to the old logging cabin. He keeps a generator and a buried vault there." Mason looked at her with pride and worry mixed in his eyes. "Lead us." They followed her through knee-deep snow until the cabin came into view, a crooked structure swallowed by pine trees. Its windows glowed faintly. "He's inside," Evelyn whispered. "He's destroying evidence." Mason didn't wait. He charged forward and kicked the door open. Heat blasted from inside. Brock had started a fire in a metal drum. Papers, hundreds of them, were burning. "No!" Lila screamed. Brock spun around, eyes wild. "Too late. You think you can take me down? You think a waitress and a spoiled millionaire can touch me?" He grabbed a thick folder from a crate and hurled it into the flames. Mason lunged at him. They collided hard, slamming into the wall. Brock swung wildly, hitting Mason across the jaw. Mason stumbled but didn't fall. "This ends now," Mason growled. Brock laughed. You're finished. Your name is Mud. The world thinks you're a criminal." Mason punched him. Once, powerful, years of suppressed anger behind it. Brock staggered. Evelyn rushed to the barrel, pulling burning pages out with gloved hands. "Some of this is still salvageable. Keep him back." Brock saw an opening. He grabbed a metal rod from the corner, raised it above Mason's head. "Mason!" Lila cried. Mason turned, too slow. The rod swung down, and a gunshot cracked through the cabin, stopping everything. The gunshot echoed across the forest like a thunderclap. Brock's arm jerked violently, the metal rod flying from his grip as he dropped to his knees with a howl of pain. Behind him, Harper Lane stepped into the doorway, breathless, snow-dusted, gripping a small handgun with shaking hands. "Touch him again," she snarled, "and I swear I won't miss next time." Lila gasped. "Harper, how did you—" "I followed the tire tracks," Harper said, eyes locked on Brock. "And I'm done watching him ruin people." Colin rushed in, wrestled Brock to the ground, and cuffed him with federal restraints. Brock fought, spit, cursed, but it was over. For the first time, the monster who had controlled the entire town lay powerless on the cabin floor. Evelyn salvaged the last of the burning documents and sealed them in a fireproof case. "This is enough," she said. "Enough to dismantle his entire network." Brock froze when he heard that. Real fear flashed through his eyes. "You don't get it," he hissed. "If I go down, others go down with me." "Good," Evelyn replied coldly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Colin had already called in federal backup. Snow lit red and blue as vehicles approached through the storm. Lila stepped closer to Brock, not trembling, not shrinking, but standing tall for the first time in years. "You hurt my brother," she said, voice steady. "You sabotaged my life. You controlled everyone around you, but you don't get to control the ending." Brock scoffed, but it lacked power. "You think anyone will believe you?" Evelyn held up the evidence packet. "They won't have to believe her. They'll believe the proof." Agents stormed in, hauling Brock to his feet. He screamed as they dragged him outside, his empire collapsing with every step. And just like that, the nightmare was over. When the cabin finally quieted, Lila turned toward Mason. He stood a few feet away, bruised, exhausted, watching her with something fragile and hopeful in his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything you lost because of me." Mason shook his head. "Lila, I didn't lose anything. I found the one thing that matters." Her breath caught. He stepped closer. "If you'll have me, I want a life with you, not out of obligation, out of choice." Tears filled her eyes, warm, freeing, overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered. "I choose you, too." Months later in Manhattan, Lila walked across her new college campus, scholarship in hand, Noah healthy again, and Mason waiting just beyond the gates with a simple ring, one she accepted with a trembling smile. Justice served, a future reclaimed, a love earned. And for the first time in her life, Lila Hart stepped forward without fear. Only hope. So that's how our story comes to an end. And hey, my dear friends, you're still here with me, right? If you've stayed all the way until this moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a way words can't fully explain. And that means more than you think. Maybe Lila's courage reminded you that even in the darkest places, there's always a light waiting to be claimed. Maybe Mason's fall and rise showed you that truth has a way of resurfacing no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. The Stoics used to say, "The obstacle is the way." And in a strange, beautiful way, that's exactly what this story teaches. Every setback Lila faced wasn't a dead end. It was shaping her into the woman who could walk through fire and still choose love, justice, and hope. And maybe, just maybe, you needed that reminder tonight. If this story touched you, healed you a little, or made you believe again in fairness and new beginnings, please give it a like. Share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you can stay with us for the next journey. We're here together, and you matter.